Today, I am so excited to dig in with Angela Bell. She is an income success coach for entrepreneurs, a mentor, and her superpower is reaching inside and pulling out the subconscious blocks that hold us back and sabotage without us knowing why. With her understanding of brain patterns and blind spots, as she calls them, she almost accidentally, which is how most things happen, created a specialty with emotional eating. And I knew it was going to be great when my project partner told me about Angela. She was actually on the phone with Angela and had a random craving for a Twinkie, which she never has had in like 20 years. And Angela said, honey, were you craving a Twinkie or were you just craving your childhood? So with that said, Angela, welcome to What We Crave.
Awesome. It's so good to see you, Erin. I'm really, really excited to do this today. This is like playtime.
It's playtime. I know. I can't wait to get into this. Thank you so much for being here. Now, I understand that this all came about because of your own battles with food and addiction and emotional eating. I think you can relate to what most everyone goes through on some level because of your own journey on both sides of the food addiction, which is giving up and gaining and restricting and starving. So what was the journey for you like personally?
It started for me at a really young age. I started dieting when I was in 5th grade.
Dang, girl.
Yeah, 5th grade. Got an early start. And part of it was just because of my interest. I loved fashion as a little girl, and I'd draw women, I'd sketch women, and I'd put clothes on them and design the clothes. And then I'd go get makeup, and I'd actually put makeup on the paper, and then I'd draw their hair. And I just really, that was a creative, fun outlet for me. And so I really paid attention to the television and all the beautiful women on there and magazines. And there were a couple women in my family, who were really focused on weight and how they looked. And it wasn't really positive. And that really impacted me. So I remember holding a Tic Tac box and counting the calories on how many Tic Tacs I'd eaten when I was in 5th grade.
Wow.
And then it kind of went on from there. In high school, I was in cheerleading and I did vocal performance. And so a lot of that, like, look at me and physicality. And then it kind of peaked in college because I did go into fashion and I also went into a business major. And on the fashion side, I would work with models all the time. We'd have big New York designers come in and throw fashion shows. And that was tough too, because I'm comparing myself to these models that I'm working with. And then I got married, and in my marriage, all of that was mirrored back to me, that you don't compare, you're not good enough. And I own that was in my head too. And I almost felt like I was just being tolerated with my current physical appearance.
Mm. And when did you realize that it was actually like truly an addiction?
At first I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get that it was an addiction. Absolutely not. I guess I'd have to start with a pivotal moment in my life. I got really, really sick at some point in my adult life. So sick that I couldn't take care of my baby boy. I couldn't go to the grocery store for myself. And whenever I did go somewhere, it pretty much included a wheelchair. And then I'd be like hammered for days,
Mm-hmm.
It would just crash me. And in that process, I found some doctors, and my doctor was a psychiatrist, an MD, and he also had the equivalent of like a PhD in homeopathy. So he was like this triple threat. He had all the alternative, the mindset stuff, and then medicine. So my first appointment with this doctor was 7 hours long. And he was doing testing that whole time. And then he came in at the end of the day and he said, congratulations, you're 27 years old, but you have the heart of a 92-year-old woman.
Jeez.
And I'm like, wow. He's like, we found this disease, this, chronic fatigue virus, this system's out of whack, this system's failing. These are results we see in cancer patients who are in like the last stages, like you're in trouble. And he said, come back tomorrow and we'll talk about treatment. So I came back and he said, look, I can treat this, I can treat this, I can treat this, and I can treat this in your body. But if you don't fix what's going on in here, you're going to keep repeating this process. And I'm going to have to keep fixing all the physical stuff, and you're not ever going to get completely better. So he's the one that introduced me to how much our mind affects our body. And as I went through that journey, because it's not a light switch, right? It's not a light switch where you're like, oh, I think it's about weight and exercise and calories. And then the next day you're like, oh my gosh, it's all up here. It was a journey. But as I worked to heal my body and then, dealt with life's challenges, I realized that it all starts here, and that I was dealing with the stressors, the emotions, the beliefs about myself, how I was interacting with other people and challenges. I was dealing with that with food in one way or another, to the point that I couldn't stop unless I changed something here first.
And how did you discover that it was 100% emotional, basically the opposite of logic and rational, and that it was coming from a different part of the brain? We don't even think about that.
Yeah. I think to understand that, we have to talk a little bit about the brain and how particularly the subconscious develops. So you may know this already, but most people don't get an owner's manual when they're born, right? So most people don't know that when you're born, your brain is in theta. So theta brainwaves is like good sleep, yoga, that kind of thing. And we're 100% open. It's like a sponge brain. So when you're young, every single thing that you see, hear, everything that happens to you, anything someone tells you goes right into your brain and gets written there and programmed there as absolute truth. So if it's someone's opinion or someone says something nasty to you, it's recorded as that's just what it is. It's a fact. And then around the age like 12, 13, we switch to beta waves, and that's like adult functioning waves, where we close off and we decide that we have learned everything we need to know. Sound like a teenager? And from that point, we're supposed to be an adult, yes, but adult supervise our brain. So what that means is that our conscious mind is supposed to take a look at what's coming out of the subconscious and say, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's complete information. Does that work for me? But we don't know to do that. And so that was my journey, was learning, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and decades of my life, learning, first of all, how to basically x-ray my own brain, and now others, of course, for the last couple decades, but to get an x-ray to know what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, you can't fix anything. So we want a clear picture of what's really happening with what's happened to you, with your emotions, with your thoughts. What's the stuff that's driving you to eat, or driving you to control, or, driving you to spend money or drink alcohol too much? What is that? And then investing in the processes and the tools to be able to rewire that.
And if you can touch on this a little bit, is what did you do personally to work on the emotional eating for you and the addiction for yourself?
I first had to take like the x-ray. And so we really call that targeting, and to find, the map of what was going on in there, because I could see that I was controlling my addiction and my eating by controlling my eating. So I was swinging between, eating to comfort myself and all those emotions when I was very unconscious or doing the subconscious stuff. And then I was controlling my food and making it perfect. Because in my head, if I ate perfect food, that equaled a perfect body, right? Then I would escalate and go to, I'm only going to eat 500 calories for the next 2 years. So obviously I got into eating disorder territory and got really thin. And then eventually, your body, out of self-preservation. This is a perfect example of the subconscious and the conscious mind. Your conscious mind does not want to eat a bag of potato chips, and it has decided not to. But late at night, when you're tired and you can't sleep because you're feeling stress and all this pain because you're alone with it, and you're sitting down on your bed, all of a sudden you realize you've just eaten half a bag of potato chips, and part of you is surprised. Well, that's the conscious mind that's surprised. The subconscious is not surprised. And it does 95% of the driving. So it's no surprise the subconscious wins, because your conscious mind only has 5% to defend itself with, right? And that's why it's important to learn how to work them together. And to go back to your question, what were the strategies I used for myself? After you target in the subconscious, then you want to move into processing. And then there's a final third step. And that one's actually my favorite because other people don't do this. And this is where you have to have a strategy to continually teach your subconscious to do what you just told it to do. Make sense? Because it has an old program and you're removing it, but you've got to put a new one back in. And we can talk about that a little bit more, but it's really those 3 steps. And really all of the time and effort that I've invested for me and my clients has really honed in those 3 steps. And I've never seen it last long term without all 3.
And I'm just thinking in my mind, all 3, that third step, like you got to do that probably every day because you're untraining 30 plus years, 40 plus years of wiring that's locked in. And, you got to carve a new path in a way is what you're saying. And that's every day, right?
Well, you're laying down, new neural pathways, but you'll be surprised once you get the old one out of the way. It's a lot easier to put in a new one. It doesn't take as much effort and it does become more automatic over time. So right. It's not such an emphasis and it doesn't take like all this push or startup energy. It's more natural because you changed you from the inside. And so you naturally want to do that now instead of, I have to remind myself, I have to do it. I have to overcome something every day just to make myself do that. It doesn't feel that way anymore. It's easier than what they were doing in the first place.
That's big. That's big. So I understand that most of your entrepreneurial business clients end up working on emotional eating and subconscious issues before you even get into the success strategies. So why is that?
So look at it this way. How you do one thing is how you do everything. So people think that, emotional eating doesn't affect their relationships or their business, or they think that how they do their business doesn't affect that, how much money they can save on the personal side or how they treat their children. But your brain is not in like pieces. Like there's the business section over here and the eating section over here. Like your brain is one holistic whole. In fact, when I started getting into all this years ago, medicine had just flipped on its head about the brain because they came out with the brain scan that more like what they have today. And before that, they couldn't see into the brain like that. And so this is what they assumed. They assumed that every piece of information that came to your frontal cortex, like where your logic is, where you learn new information, where you pull on all your experience and your wisdom, and that your brain sorted through, okay, what does this information that I'm seeing mean? And then it would disperse it to where it needed to go and you would have the appropriate reaction. Well, that's 100% wrong. So everything that you notice in life goes through your fight or flight center in the back of your brain. And if anything on there is similar to a pain or a trauma you've had, a stress emotional pattern that you're dealing with, if any of that is similar and triggers that, you'll go right into stress response. You never get to think about it. The conscious mind is not involved. It's automatic. And that's important, right? Because we need to stay alive. But unfortunately, most of the things that it triggers have nothing to do with us staying alive, right? Like most of what it triggers is the emotional stresses and the pain and the unresolved issues. And then our subconscious has to come up with a solution for us. And it doesn't ask our conscious mind. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't have to. It has 95% ownership, remember? So it just comes up with a plan and then does it. And then we're like, how did I gain 20 pounds? How did that happen?
Exactly.
And so we've got to be able to resolve those issues. And it's the same thing for entrepreneurs. You know, teaching an entrepreneur business strategies and success strategies before you deal with all of those stressors that are basically blowing holes in their brain, because you never get to this part of the brain if it's constantly getting triggered back here, right? So it's kind of like if I put in success strategies and business strategies in a bowl before I heal those holes with them that are in the bowl, it just all falls out. And you can't make any recipe in their business. But if I can patch those holes and rewire them and fix them all and, show them things and create new habits, then we put the business and success principles in, then they're successful. And it's the same way with eating. Good luck with that workout program and that diet if you don't fix the holes in your brain first, basically.
So what you're saying is that the patterns and subconscious emotional logic, which is not logical, or holes, as you say, sabotages not just the eating patterns, but all success patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the best aha moments, I think, on this whole summit.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad, because it sure was powerful for me. It changed my whole life, my health, my eating, my finances, my relationships. I get it right at the core too.
So talk about why our own brains would sabotage us, because that's a whole new concept. We want to think that even our subconscious wants the same thing that our conscious mind wants, but explain the difference.
No, that's a fairy tale. The only way your subconscious wants what your conscious mind wants is if you learn how to be the adult that's supervising the subconscious, and you're removing what doesn't work for you and putting in what does work for you. That's the only way that happens. So this brain sabotages you for one reason and one reason only: to keep you alive. That's why your fight or flight center is the first place all information goes, is to make sure and determine whether this is a threat or not. Because if it's a threat, then that's the first priority. But what gets mixed up along the way is what's a threat and what do you do about it. So when we're little kids and we fall off our bike and skin our knee, our mom gives us a cookie. When we go to the doctor, get our strep test or whatever, we get a sucker. So we've learned that pain equals eat food. So your brain says, oh my gosh, we had something so scary. In order to feel safe again and for our nervous system and everything to go back online, we need to eat a cookie or a sucker. It also gets signals messed up, like in a spelling bee when you're in junior high and you fail, you come in second, heaven forbid. And you have this trauma around it that no one, including you, knew how to help you deal with. And then, fast forward, you're an entrepreneur and you're running this business and you need to be in the spotlight for a minute. Your brain is like all freak out mode because it's like, this isn't safe. This isn't safe. We failed at this before and it was horrible. And it doesn't even give you a chance to be the adult person you are in a totally different situation. It thinks that you're back in junior high at the spelling bee. So that's how the brain sabotages it. It sabotages us because it thinks it's taking care of us. It thinks it's comforting us. It thinks it's keeping us safe. And that's like a DNA auto response. That's not something that you want to rewire, right? We want to keep a certain amount of safety alerts on so that we will be safe. But most of them are not actual safety alerts. They're just emotional baggage that hasn't been unpacked.
That was amazing. With that being said, I understand a lot of people and experts even give strategies and even address the subconscious pieces of emotional eating, but you go a step further and you do something that I've never heard anyone else do. You actually remove that faulty wiring and rewire a new pattern first super quickly. And then you do something called backfilling. So can you explain why you can rewire and get those results so quickly, and then talk about backfilling, because what that means is so important?
Well, one of the tools that I do use is tapping. And by itself, I don't believe it accomplishes the whole goal. Not in my experience, not in my client's experience, but it's really good at bringing down the volume in the brain and getting the brain ready to put something else in. For instance, they use it, more severe case maybe would be PTSD. So if someone in the armed services has a severe case of PTSD, they're no longer in Afghanistan in the trauma, but their body's still reacting here and biochemically like it is, and it causes physical illness, mental illness, all sorts of problems, right? Tapping will actually heal that. They have a 93% cure rate in 6 sessions. That's amazing, because obviously there's typically more than one trauma behind PTSD anyway. In that scenario.
That's incredible. Because PTSD from veterans and abuse. People struggle with it their whole
Accidents.
life. Yeah. And to be able to do that fast. Yeah. Accidents. I mean, that's incredible.
And really, PTSD is just on one end of the trauma scale, right? So really every person to some degree has a type or kind of PTSD because we all experience trauma and we just don't know how to deal with it. So I love tapping for that. But then we get to backfilling. And backfilling is where, okay, tapping has removed the trauma, the emotions, the patterns, even the body chemistry reactions that happen when all of that runs. Because your brain is what decides what chemicals are released in your body. So all that gets dealt with on step 2 when we're getting rid of that trauma and processing it. But step 3 is where we need to decide what would work better for me. What do I want to think instead? What do I want to feel instead? What do I want to do instead? And then we put that into the brain and we wire it in. And you can do that in the moment, in the same session. It's part of our process. But then there's some other steps that we do to help you get what it is you wanted in the first place. So that takes us back to my conversation about the Twinkie with our friend. What is it that she really wanted? And it wasn't a Twinkie. I knew it wasn't a Twinkie. And we do that through different habits. We do it through really drilling down to find out what it is they really want. And often there's multiple layers of like stories and lies. I remember one client wanted to spend more time with her grandchildren, and she had all these stories that it could only be this big trip every year. And the rest of the year she couldn't see them. So the rest of the year she was eating. I'm like, well, I understand there are some travel restrictions, in people's lives, and only so much that our kids will let us come live with them sometimes and things like that. But, very quickly when she realized she was doing that, she was able to see lots of different ways that she could have connections and traditions with her grandchildren and her children outside of just one big vacation every year. And then that will create a biofeedback loop, all those new little habits getting her what she wants. It'll create a biofeedback loop so that the brain knows it's getting what it wants. And over time, it's just natural. It just knows it's going to get what it wants. And so there's no impulse or craving to eat outside of just our physical needs.
So can you give us an example of that? Because someone like me, my pattern would be get stressed, go to the fridge, grab the food, even if it's healthy. I'm not really hungry, but it's okay because it's healthy and I don't really need it, but yet I want to soothe. How would I replace that habit? What would that backfill look like?
So it's a 3-step process, but we could do step 1 here today. Do you want to work on that?
Yeah.
So this is where we're going to kind of get a picture of what's going on in your mind and get the right target. So this goes back to the Twinkie with our friend. What is it that you really want? Because there's a couple things at play here, but first we'll go with what is it that you really want? How are you feeling when you go to get that extra food?
I think it is a place of wanting to soothe or seek comfort. Yeah, in a time of stress.
So you're feeling stress.
Uh-huh.
Is that pretty common when you go for the food?
Almost every time. Mm-hmm.
Okay. You know that stress is pushing it. And in a session situation, we get behind that even more to find out what the stressors are and really almost like a movie about them so that I know and you know exactly what that stress looks like, feels like, sounds like, all of it. But for now, we'll just call it stress. Mm-hmm. We know you want to soothe and comfort. And then there's another element there. There's another program running. You're eating healthy food, so it's okay.
Yep. Because I would never touch the processed junk because I know too much about that. I know how it destroys you. But the healthy stuff, it's like, oh, it's fine because it's healthy and I can always go work it off at the gym later, or I can,
work it off later.
Mm-hmm.
So is there ever a time where you can just comfort yourself and it can just be okay and you can have what you need and you don't have to pay it back?
There are some times where I'm like, I'm just going to enjoy this because, I have definitely done that. But if I'm having instead of 1 paleo donut, if I have 3, that's when I'm like, I need to go walk 3 extra miles today.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So we want to get to where, you have your 80 to 90% where you're eating healthy, you have healthy habits for your life, for your body, for your brain, for your heart. And then we're going to go for 10 to 20, depending on the person, right?
Mhm.
10 to 20% of the time where you can just tune in and say, this is what I want. And there's no, it has to be perfect. It has to be healthy, because you are being healthy most of the time. Your body's got that no problem, right? It's not what your body's exposed to. It's your body's ability to fight it off, process it, deal with it. But do you remember when I said I was eating perfect food because that equaled a perfect body?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a story going in underneath there. So now we have a few patterns that now we can take through the processing, and then later the strategies to get you what you want and get new habits.
So what if I'm picking up what you're throwing down here? It's like perfectionism is underneath this. Why are you seeking perfectionism? Is it because my dad didn't love me unless I was perfect, or whatever, things like that, that's where we start pulling layers. Okay.
Yep, we just grab the end. And honestly, you can get it from the first sentence someone says.
Yeah.
But we ask questions because what I say is interesting. What you say is like truth to you. And so we want you to grow the ability to be able to use your conscious mind to open up your subconscious, x-ray it, find this stuff yourself, and then use the tools and the processes that we give you.
I mean, just even nailing that much of it, I already feel it's like aha moment. It makes so much sense. And then once it clicks, I can just go right back to that. I mean, I can only imagine what a session would be like with you. So talk to us really quickly about toxic perfectionism and how it plays into this equation.
So toxic perfectionism is one of those programs that your subconscious comes up with on its own and doesn't ask your permission, and it runs it full time to keep you safe. And what it thinks is that if you're perfect, nothing bad will ever happen to you and you'll have everything you want. Feel like maybe you are a little familiar with some of that. So I say that toxic perfectionism put me in a wheelchair. So I'm right there with you, sister. I had to really work to heal that. And there's one thing that drives toxic perfectionism. And Brene Brown said it best because she studied shame for 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, she summed it up in 4 words. Shame is a killer. And shame is what drives perfectionism. It's like the gas in the car. So there is no perfectionism if you're not shaming yourself for where you are now, what you look like now. That's the tape in your head that's so negative. And it's what motivates you to try to be perfect every day. And then when you do achieve something, it just moves the finish line. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Really, you need to be here. Mm-hmm. And so you're in a constant pattern of trying, too much adrenaline, working too hard, shaming yourself, and then getting somewhere, and then it's still not good enough and you have to move the finish line. And it doesn't feel very good and it's exhausting. So then your subconscious is like, oh my gosh, we need a break. And it hides from the conscious mind, right? And it grabs a bag of chips, or it grabs the extra healthy bar, or whatever it is, like in your situation.
4 at a time sometimes. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this is important for perfectionists to get. When you eat 4 bars, the reason your subconscious is doing it is because then it can shame you later.
Dang.
And then it has that shame to fuel your next day. It's an evil little pattern. It wears us out. And it's like the coolest people, I'm serious, like the coolest people have had or have this program.
That is really fascinating and mind-blowing.
Because it doesn't feel safe to not feel good enough. And so this is where we get even into diseases like, when I had anorexia, I was willing to starve my body, which will kill me, in order to feel good enough so I could feel safe. Yeah. See how there's no logic in the subconscious. There's just reaction, and let's get you what you need.
That's fascinating.
Kind of got to some heavy stuff.
I love this. You're hitting it home, because if you really let that sink in, my mind is so focused on protecting me that it would rather have me feel shameful because that's what's known, and not feeling shame is not known. So it's unsafe. Mm-hmm. Is so wild.
Well, and think of the last time you cheated and really felt bad about it. We're going to just say cheated
Uh-huh.
on your diet and felt bad about it. When you felt bad, didn't you then feel kind of good, like motivated?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
See, it's really an addictive pattern because what your subconscious is doing is actually looking for a payoff from the hypothalamus, your drugstore. It wants the drugstore to release the drugs, and it will release the drugs based on the feeling that most easily produces those drugs. So if you play shame all the time and your body releases dopamine, your body's going to request a heck of a lot of shame so it can have lots of dopamine.
Ah,
So we're all kind of drug addicts on the inside, which is why it's so important to get the brain under supervision.
I mean, shit, girl. That makes so much sense. I'm hoping everyone that's listening, the lights just went on. That is profound. That's what's happening in our brain, is that we want that drug. So we're going to do what we need to do to get the drug in our brain.
But if you're a perfectionist, you have to eat perfect food to cheat.
Perfectionist, you have to eat perfect food to cheat. Yep.
And then you get the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you can enjoy
it
it.
to be perfect, but then you get to shame yourself for eating too much of it.
Yeah.
You're such a good one. See, you do it really well. And actually doing it really well is a gift because then it's easier to see. You know what it feels like. Like everything I've brought up, the emotional triggers, what it feels like after, you're connecting to it. So that's actually a huge win for you. Don't look at it as, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. It's actually a huge win because if you can connect to it, then we can teach you what to do about it. If you can't connect to it, we can't get you past step one.
Right. Okay. So,
but don't worry, we're good at helping people to connect to it. It's just nice that while we're live, you can actually connect to it.
Yeah. Well, because I've been fascinated with this topic for years, and which is why we're doing this thing.
Yeah.
I'm always wondering, like, what is actually happening in the brain? You're diving deep on that. That's
safety program. It's on your DNA level. It's just always going to be there. So learn about it and learn how to work with it.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things we're hearing here, Miss Angela, is this has nothing to do with willpower. In effect, it's our responsibility to change and grow, but this pattern is not necessarily our fault because I think it's destructive to believe that we're weak somehow. So why is willpower bogus in this whole situation here?
Yeah. Well, before we go into willpower, I want to underline what you said about it's harmful to think that we're weak because that would be shaming.
Okay. So
right. And we know shaming does weaken your body physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically. So yeah, let's put that aside. It's a no shame zone. You want to create a no shame zone in your body. So willpower is bogus because it's a function of the conscious mind. And so that's like saying that 5% of your brain is going to run the other 95%, and that's not going to happen. The subconscious is always going to win, and it's meant to partner with the conscious mind. And so the conscious mind, your heart connecting to your mind, needs to decide, I'm going to learn how to get the best from my subconscious and heal and rewire the things that aren't. That's how you move together with everything, your mind and your heart, to get what it is you want in this life.
So when someone is finding themselves addicted to food or eating emotionally instead of what we logically know is best, what do you recommend that we do?
First of all, have a little compassion for yourself because, again, no one was born with an owner's manual. And then choose to invest your time and your effort to learn how to manage the subconscious, because nothing changes long term until you learn how to manage the subconscious. The body chemistry will follow that, your habits and actions will follow that, and then your health and your weight and your appearance will follow that.
So if you could look back on your life and give us one piece of advice that would save us years of searching, what would it be?
I don't know why this is so hard for me to say. It's like almost making me cry. That's why. Like when I gave you these last two answers, like it's like my insides to the world kind of thing.
I love it.
Nothing that you want comes from the outside of you or is earned. Everything that you want is already inside of you. And your job is to remove the barriers so that you can find it and have it.
That's pretty huge. That's like,
you asked.
Yeah. Because I mean, I know just in my situation, I hustled on the outside for everything,
Yeah.
that hustler mentality, the go-getter, that vibe is definitely has been part of my story. And to just go, that's not how it has to be. It's all inside. Like that's a complete rewiring that I would have never have guessed.
Yeah. We think we can earn love, which I know for me and a lot of clients that I've worked with, eating is a part of that, right? Like how I look and what I weigh will equal how much people love me or how successful I am. So there's a lot of earning, and we'll never get what we want until we don't have to earn it. We just find it inside of ourselves.
And how do you find it inside of yourself?
You've got to remove the blocks and the barriers, all those things that were literally written in your brain with a magic marker before you were even 7 years old, and the things that have happened to you since that you didn't know how to take care of and heal and reconcile. Those are the things that are blocking you from feeling safe enough to just go inside and find everything you want.
See, and of course now I want to be like, and how do we do that? But that's where you
it's the exact same pattern for emotional eating as it is for PTSD, as it is for business success. That's the great thing. It is the same pattern.
And that's why you're with us, is because we need guidance on that. We need coaching. We need someone, sometimes we can do it on our own. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes we need someone to pull those things up with us. And I'm so glad you're sharing this with us.
We teach you how to clean your room. We give you the processes and the tools and the skills to clean your room. And then we come in and clean your closet.
Love that. So at the end of the day, when we catch ourselves emotionally eating, what do you think we're actually craving?
So what we all are actually craving, and we call it different things, but everything we call it can go under 2 words, and that's love and safety. We crave love and we crave safety, and we crave being good enough to have both. I actually have a little exercise. Can I leave you in the audience with a little something to do?
Please. Yes.
It's really easy until you go to do it, and then I guarantee some people will struggle with this. In the morning when you're brushing your teeth, look yourself right in the eye in the mirror, and I want you to do this with your hands. My worth is a set point in the universe. It was given the moment I was born. Everything else is just an experience. My weight is an experience. Pretty hair is an experience. Ugly teeth is an experience. And our job is to go in, connect to ourselves, supervise all the patterns and blocks and stories that are going on in here, clean them up, and then go get us the experiences that we want. Then we can create the experiences that we want, but not until this gets cleaned up.
It's just incredible what you've given us so far. It's just the tip of the iceberg,
So the cool thing is once you know how it all works, you can create the experiences that you want. So you can look a certain way, you can have a certain health, you can create a business, you can change your relationships. But it all starts with being able to know how it works and getting to that core of, I am loved, I am safe, and you know what? I'm safe with me because I love me.
Basically, yeah. So I'm in a puddle now. I am fascinated and I just want to learn more. I'm sure everyone else does. So thank you for sharing all of this. This is change. This is how we get the freedom from these food addictions. This is the root cause right here. And
lasting change.
Lasting change. Yeah. This is lasting change. Yeah. Beautifully said.
You're adorable and so fun, Erin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being a part of What We Crave.